Welcome to the Cake Therapy Podcast, a slice of joy and healing with your host, Dr. Altricia Foster. This is a heartwarming and uplifting space that celebrates the transformative power of baking therapy. The conversations will be a delightful blend of inspirational stories, expert insights, and practical baking tips. Each episode will take listeners on a journey of self-discovery, emotional healing, and connection through the therapeutic art of baking. There's something here for everyone, so lock in and let's get into it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Cake Therapy Podcast, your slice of joy and healing. And as we promise, we bring slices of joy and healing from across the globe. And today we are excited and we're honored to have Miss Halima Mirza into the place. She's the owner of Halima's Cake Artistry, and she's one of my favorites on the web. She's my favorite cake artist on the Instagram. I remember DMing her and talking to her, and I was like, Alima, you're so dope. And she was like, oh, I didn't know I was dope. But I'm like, her work is dope. She's amazing. She provides great feedback when you talk to her. So welcome to the space, Halima. Welcome.
Thank you, Altricia. It's really lovely to meet you finally after all these years.
No, it's my pleasure. You know, I like having conversations with cake artists such as yourself because of what I found in baking. You know, baking has changed and baking has saved my life. And I know that baking is so instrumental to so many other bakers across the globe. So I'm excited to dive into your story to learn about you and your cake artistry.
Sounds fantastic. I can't wait. Let's go.
Yeah. So first, I typically do a mental health check-in. Like, how are you doing? Like, we know of all these atrocities happening across the globe right now, and I can recognize your faith. And I'd like to see, like, how are you doing, Alima? What's your mental, what are you feeling in this moment?
That's a really lovely question, actually, very thoughtful. I think, as you said, I think it's been a very difficult few months for a lot of people. We are witnessing so much unfolding in front of our very eyes. You know, social media is so transparent nowadays. You really can't miss what's going on. I think there are a lot of people out there who are just hurting, to be honest. You know, we see what's going on. We are trying our best in our own capacity to try and change things. And
Mm-hmm.
in our own way, we are trying to make a difference. Whether that actually makes a difference or an impact, I think we'll have to wait and see. But
Yeah.
it's I think what's happening on a global level is very much on everyone's mind, and cakes at the moment are secondary.
Yes.
So we can hope and pray for the best. And yeah, I'm really pleased you asked me that. That's a great way to start the podcast.
Of course, girl. Like over at Cake Therapy, we care about our baker friends. We understand what's going on, and we have to recognize that people's faith are being tested right now. So it's good to kind of check in to see how you're doing. Your website says that Alima Cake Artistry is a bespoke cake and sugar flour artist, creative lead, designer. You're in Nottingham, UK. All of
Yes.
that fancy stuff is on your website, right? So tell me, like, we see your cakes, they're majestic, they move, they're clean. Tell us, how has been the cake season for you so far this year?
Well, over the past 2, 3 weeks or so, is that what we're referring to?
Yes.
It's been a quiet start to the year in January, which is great.
Uh-huh.
Because there's always admin, there's always accounts, and many other things to do. So, I always look forward to this time of the year because it's a case of looking forward to how I'm going to project the next year to be. What are my goals? What are my ambitions? How do I want to change things compared to last year? So it's a great time to actually wind down and kind of think about how I want this year to be different to the previous year. So it's been fantastic, a good start so
Right.
far. Nice and slow and steady, which is what I like.
Yeah.
But lots of planning and lots of things coming up in over the year. So I'm excited.
Yeah. So how was 23 for you in terms of cakes, the industry, how you felt you did in 2023? And yeah.
It was a great year. I think every year I feel as if I learn more and more. Every time I make a cake, I design a cake, I work with clients. there's always something to learn and pick up from, and I feel as if I'm evolving as an artist year after year. So last year it was a great year, lots of inquiries, lots of great orders, had lots of clients who were very happy to just let me lead and have that creative kind of lead, which I think is amazing. I think a lot of people would love to have that. So it's been a really good year, and I'm just looking forward to seeing what comes up next. But I'm very
Yeah.
happy with the way the year's gone. One of the best things about being self-employed is that you can kind of pick and choose.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I am careful about doing that. So I try not to overbook myself. I don't like to be too stressed out and do too many
Mm-hmm.
orders. It's quality over quantity always. And that's always been my motto from the very beginning.
Mm.
And I just love the fact that I can kind of, if I find a client comes to me and they love my work and they love my creativity and they're happy to go with my lead, and that's really the kind of client I'm aiming towards, as opposed to someone just saying, here's a picture, can you make this? It's not really the way, I work. So
Yeah. So you did mention like lots of lessons. Like, what was the biggest lesson you learned last year?
that's a good question, actually. And what's the biggest question? Do you know what? I think last year's probably the first year when I properly sat down and thought, do you know what? If someone comes to me and they want to order something that I'm not happy with, I'll just say no, or just I'm
Yes.
sorry, I'm fully booked. And it actually, people just say that very easily, but it's actually very hard to do in practice, because when
Mm-hmm.
when you are thinking about the financial aspect, or actually one order is better than no orders, it's actually very hard to turn around and say no, even if your heart's not into it.
Yes.
Um, so I just learned that, if I was going to turn my oven on, it has to be worth my while. That's the way I think about it from a creative point of view. It's got to really
Yeah.
speak to my heart in order for me to want to do that work. And for me, I like to share everything that I do on social media. So I don't want to be spending a couple of days or a week or so working on that one order that I don't
Mm-hmm.
like and I can't share on social media either. I just want to be able to
Yeah.
share with fans and followers. So yeah, I think learning to say no and just accepting that not every client is my ideal client, which I've always said, even in previous podcasts and stuff. That's always
Mm-hmm.
been the way I've thought. But I think that thinking actually does take you very far, and it's very important to stop and think about what your ideal client base is and to try and target them.
I like that because I always tell people that uh I have to first feed my soul in terms of like baking. I can't do anything that's not feeding my soul. So I kudos to you for learning that lesson, Alima. Um, we
Yeah.
see your
Mhm.
cakes, we see your style, we can spot Halima's cake. Once it comes up in in the feed, we know it's you without even clicking to see. Well, for me, because I've been a fan of yours for a long time, so I know your cake when I see it. But tell me a little bit about who you are growing up, your family life, your Muslim background.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting you should say that, because a lot of people do say to me, actually, when we see your work, instantly we know it's you. And I've always thought to myself, what is it that they know about? And I think it's obviously the style of my work. And I think for the longest time I didn't
Yeah,
really know what my style was. But it's amazing to me, and it just sounds so honest. I'm thinking, is she talking to me there, that she recognizes my style from my work? I just think that's just, it's really special when people say that. And it makes me feel like, do you know what? I
yeah.
think I'm okay in this business that people will actually say that. So, in terms of background, so I grew up in London. That's where all
Yeah.
my family are. Parents originally from Pakistan, dad from India before the partition. Came over to this country when they were very young, had the dreams of working here, earning money, kind of helping their family back home. Growing up, parents were not very educated, but they were really keen to make me and my siblings to provide us with
Hmm.
education, the best opportunities, make us go to university, all those sorts of dreams that parents have. So I went through the whole education system. I did accountancy at university,
Right.
but never quite got into the accountancy field. It wasn't really my thing. Although I was good at numbers, it didn't excite me. So did a couple of jobs in London. Then I met my husband. That was almost 20 years ago. And then I moved up to Nottingham, and then life just changed because it was like a completely different city. It's much smaller than London, so it's a completely different environment. Took me a while to get used to it. But I tried many different jobs up here, and I just found that I
Hmm.
didn't like anything. Everything was just not my cup of tea. Then I had children. I've got
Yeah.
two children, a son and a daughter. And then while they were young, I started working at a university. And that's really where the whole cake business started, because I did a charity event there. And that's really how the whole thing started. But it's amazing how when I was young, I never used to bake any cakes. I had no interest in baking whatsoever. In fact, the only cakes we would ever eat from home were the cakes my mum would bake us. And bless my mum, they were not the best cakes.
Yeah.
So good. She never really followed a recipe. Not really mum's fault, but she
Yeah.
wasn't educated. She couldn't actually read recipes. So she couldn't actually follow a recipe and actually see what was meant to. She used to just use an estimate of what would go in there: flour, sugar, eggs, and that kind of thing. So, but I used to love her cakes.
Yeah.
So when I came to the cake industry, I always thought to myself, I would love for my mum to taste my cakes and just give me some feedback, which she does now, which is lovely. But unfortunately, she's diabetic. She
Yeah.
can't. So she does have a little bit here and there, which is great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, from a faith perspective, I've always been I grew up as quite a strict Muslim. Our
Mm-hmm.
parents were brought us up to pray regularly, to fast, to do all the things that all good Muslims would do. And I think we've been very lucky because parents, although they grew up back home, we came over here, well, we were born over here. And we were always taught to just make mistakes in order to learn from them. There's nothing wrong with that. Dad was a big believer in that. He was like,
Right.
we can tell you countless times, you shouldn't do something, but if you feel like you need to do it just to learn from it, go ahead and do that. And that's the way we kind of grew up. So they were very open-minded. They're very understanding of us, and they would always give us a lot of freedom. At the same time, because we grew up in a very religious environment, we
Mm-hmm.
knew where our boundaries were, and hopefully that was instilled firmly enough inside us that we would never make mistakes that we would kind of live to regret. But everyone's life is different, so I don't judge
Everyone's life is different. I totally agree with you. Because like my question to you would have been like, did you bake when you were a kid? And I'm like, she said no. Tell me,
that.
what is it about that event that you did that
Yes.
made you decide that this is a thing that I could actually do?
I love talking about this, by the way, because it just takes me back, because it was almost 10 years ago when I was at this university, and it was a charity event. So they were just like, it was for cancer research for Macmillan. And I just volunteered. I said, look, I'll bring some cupcakes in. And I hadn't baked cupcakes for a very long time. I mean, I'm not a baker. So I looked for a recipe on the internet. I thought, right, I'm going to bake these cupcakes. I'll take them inside,
Mm-hmm.
and that's my contribution, over and done with. But when I went inside, there were some students that I knew from the university, and they came up to me and they just went, your cupcakes, they were really, really delicious. I mean, if you ever make cakes outside, just let us know. We would love to buy them from you. And I was like, wow, they must have been really good if they're saying that. And at first, I thought to myself, are they just being nice or do they actually mean it? And then I think I mentioned that I might be making some more cupcakes, and they were actually very genuinely interested. So it kind of got me thinking that at the time I was working in the university library. It was a lot of hours. It was quite far from where I lived. I just thought it's a lot of work. I thought if I could perhaps think about entering the cake industry and seeing how I could grow as an artist and see where that would lead me. That image is in market research and have a look at the local bakers. I had a friend who was a baker as well. And what I felt was, up in this area, there were lots of young couples who are probably going to get married, and they want to have like really fancy wedding cakes, something elegant and something quite modern in design, quite artistic. And I felt at the time no one was offering that. There were some people offering cakes and other designs and other styles, and of course, it's a market for everything. But I felt that niche was missing. So that was my target market at that time. I was like, this is what I want to do. But of course, when I started, it was very basic cakes, cupcakes, cake pops, that kind of thing. Um, and the business just grew from there. And the more I did it, the more I loved it. I loved it so much that eventually I had to give up the job at the university because I just
Mm-hmm.
couldn't. I mean, at the time, I was being asked to do demos, I was being asked to teach, I was being asked to do so many things that I couldn't say yes to because I was still working there. Then I had the cake business. But I remember, Tricia, I used to come back from work quite often, quite late in the evening, around 10 o'clock. And on many occasions, for the first couple of years, I would have cake orders on. I would come back and work on my cake orders up until 3 or 4 in the morning sometimes. And that was quite a regular thing. And then
Yeah.
I'd go to sleep and then wake up at around 7 a.m. So 3, 4 hours sleep, it wasn't enough. But day after day, it was grinding me down. It wasn't
Yeah.
healthy. And I realized that. It took me a long time to realize that to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I finally got to the point after doing so many years of cakes that I just realized that actually I probably could give up the job and not have to worry about the financial aspect or anything, um,
Mhm.
and just make this business work. And that's what I did eventually. So yeah, and never looked back.
You know what? Kudos to you for realizing that you couldn't sustain that. But then I want to touch on the fear that you mentioned that you could actually survive without that 9 to 5. Isn't it
Mm.
amazing how we often question ourselves and to think that we can't live without working for someone else? And
Yes.
the fear of that, we're not going to be able to afford this lifestyle that we dream of for ourselves and for our children.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
yeah.
it's a very real fear, to be honest, for a lot of people. I mean, thankfully, I'm in a position where I don't have to really worry too much about financial things. I do it more because I really enjoy this business. And if I take on orders, I don't have to worry about will it be earning me enough money for me to pay my overheads for the week. It's not like
Mhm.
that. So I think I'm in a very unique position.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think if all your life, all you ever known is working for other people, and that's the norm, to then suddenly drop that and say, well, actually, I'm going to work for myself. It's like, whoa, that's a completely new field. It's like, how on earth do you work for yourself? How do you do the accounts? How do you
Mhm.
manage it? It's just the whole concept is very
Excuse
scary.
me. Yeah.
So, of course, the whole idea was quite frightening at first, but the more you do it, I think the better you become. And obviously, you become
Yeah.
more experienced. You learn so much from yourself, from other people that you know as well. It's part of life. It's a learning curve, isn't it?
Yeah. It definitely is a learning curve. And it does take you some time to get to that place where you're comfortable enough to walk away. So it's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
So were you doing anything creative before? Like you're an accountant. That is very not creative. Okay.
No, it's interesting because actually, after doing accountancy, I decided that I definitely did not want to do any more of that. It was just boring to me. I thought, no. I made it for my dad because he had this dream that I'd become an accountant, and it was really to fulfill his dream, to be honest. But dad passed away several years ago, and I think he's never seen me going into the cake industry. But I think if he was alive today, I think he'd be so proud of me for
Yeah.
achieving this. Um, because he would have been, he would have said, I know when Halima puts her mind to something, whatever it is, she will go ahead and she will achieve it because she's so
Mhm.
headstrong. So that's one thing I really miss. I wish he was around to actually physically see this business, this studio that I'm sitting at the moment, and just what I've managed to do over the past few years. I think I feel very lucky, but I feel a
Yeah.
bit sad that he hasn't been around to see that. Um, I've completely forgotten the question.
Yeah. Were you creative? Have you always been creative prior to
So I think I
entering
had an
into
artistic flair when I was at school, for sure. I used to love doing things that were a bit different, and I think I was always very artistic. But growing up, it almost felt like I think you just kind of feel like being artistic. It was more like a hobby. If you want to do a job, you want to work somewhere, you want someone to pay you a really good salary, it has to be something functional, something which
Yeah.
everyone else is doing. I don't know what it's like in your culture. I'm assuming like very similar to ours, but the big professions like doctors, teachers, this is what's pushed to us. And I just knew that I had no
Yeah.
interest in science. I didn't want to do any of those things. And I never actually thought about the cake industry. It just never occurred to me. To be honest, it was
Mhm.
more of being up here in this city, and I felt like things were different here. Before I was here, I used to work as an immigration officer, and it was the best job I ever had. I loved it.
Yeah.
So you can't get any less creative than that. You just follow
Mm.
the rules.
Yeah.
It's
Yep. Yep.
completely different industry.
And the thing about it is, um, it is the same in our culture. We're taught we can be to be able to strive or live a successful life, you have to be a lawyer, doctor,
Yeah.
Indian chief. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Something
Yeah.
that is fully functional. And I think most of us are led into professions that our own parents dream of for
Mhm.
themselves. So we're actually like living their dream for them by
Yeah.
doing
That's
these,
a good thing. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And it
Mhm.
really there's a cultural connection and a cultural context, and it's mostly from these developing worlds that our parents
Mhm.
come from,
Yeah.
because they know the struggles that they had to endure to get us to where we are. So I can understand you doing accounting because you were told you could be a great accountant, and I could
Yeah.
understand you not even looking at anything artistic because that's frowned upon. Like, what kind of career is that in my culture?
Exactly.
So I
Yeah.
figured, yeah, it's similar to yours.
Definitely. I completely agree. So many things you said there just sounded so familiar. And I think definitely we have the same cultural backgrounds. And I think, like you said, I think if you really have to struggle to get somewhere, then obviously your perspective will be completely different. But I think
Yeah.
we are lucky enough to have, I think, the best of both worlds. So we can have the culture, but we also have so many just so many great things living in the West, I think, that we take advantage of. And I think sometimes the parents don't quite understand the two, the dynamics between the two of them. So I can't blame them
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy
Yeah.
of trying to merge both worlds for our parents who are the immigrants, right? And that the
Yeah.
kids are
They're
now
happy and
living
we're happy as
living the
well.
dream. Yeah, exactly. Oh, interesting life parallels.
For some people, their happiness is more important than your own.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that happens too.
Absolutely. And the thing is, we find ourselves wanting them to be happier than us. Well,
Mm.
we just go along to get along. That's what it says. People say we go along to get along. Um, as we were preparing for this, um, Alima, we were listening to another podcast where you talked about that you always felt like there was something missing as you
Mhm.
were doing accounting. You see how prepared we are over here? Yeah. You always you always felt like something was missing. Talk to us and our listeners about the void that you felt and how this process of baking
And when
and
you're doing a
creating.
job, you're doing your career, education, or whatever, you just carry on, just do things. You don't ever stop to think about, is this actually what I really want to do? It becomes a very practical thing because financially it's paying your bills, it's working along with the whole family environment, so it's fantastic, everything's great. And you don't actually really stop very often to think, hang on, is this what I really want to do? Um, so I think at some point when I was doing accountancy, I mean, I knew very early on, I think after, so we have 3 years at university over here. After the very first year, I realized this is not for me. I don't enjoy it. But I actually wasn't
Mhm.
brave enough to either speak to my dad about this or even accept myself that it isn't right for me. I thought, is it easy for me to give up now and just not go to university, which would be a complete taboo? That would not be the thing to do.
Mhm.
Or perhaps change course, which is quite scary. And I wasn't sure how dad would react to that. So it just didn't make any sense. I just thought, I'll just carry on and just do it. And then by the
Mhm.
end of year 3, when all my friends were going on to do professional accounting qualifications, I was just like, "There's no way I'm gonna go and do that. It's just not me." And I just
Yeah.
knew I didn't know what was missing, but I felt this just wasn't where I wanted to be, and I wouldn't be happy. I didn't want to spend another 4 or 5 years studying. I was fed up of studying by that point. It was
Yeah.
such hard work, and I was like, "I don't wanna be doing this anymore. I want to have a life." So, that's when I left university and I thought, right, I'm gonna start looking for a job. And
Mhm.
eventually I found a job with the Home Office, which is like, you must have heard of the Home Office.
Yes,
I
of
do all the
course. Yeah.
immigration inquiries, and I absolutely loved that job. It was the best thing ever. I met people from all the different countries. I learned so
Mhm.
much about personal situations and what was going on. Um, it was a fantastic thing to be able to say to people, yes, we grant you asylum in this country, or we don't. It was just amazing. Everything
Yeah.
about it was fantastic. So it was all going well until I left to come to Nottingham, and then it was like, wow, I'm back at step one again. I have no idea what to do. So yeah.
Mhm. I had Sona from Lima Cakes on the other day.
Mhm.
And when you listen to her podcast,
Mhm.
you'll see some parallels in your story.
Ooh,
So
really?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So it's interesting. It really is interesting how bakers become bakers and people,
Mhm.
change from going to university and then transitioning into this art form. You started working at the home office and you moved to Nottingham. Do you feel like your cakes, I said, oh my God, creating these breathtaking cakes of yours, Halima, have they now helped you to fill the void?
Yes, they really have. And even saying that, it makes me smile because I say to my friends and other creatives and people that I know, um, that I just feel so, so blessed and lucky.
Mm-hmm.
I don't say that lightly. I really, from my heart, I mean it. To be able to wake up every morning and to be able to choose to do a client's cake and to be able to do what I love, making flowers, things that I feel like I really have so much passion for. And I feel like
Yes.
every time I do something, I want to make it even better next time. And I have that vision in my head. And hopefully, a lot of clients will come and give to me and say to me, "Look, just do whatever you like, and that's fine." So I get the chance to actually
Mm-hmm.
try that out on clients' cakes as well. it's the most amazing feeling ever. So the void was definitely filled, and I knew it a long time ago. But initially, it felt like it was a struggle because I felt
Yeah.
like the prices I wanted to charge, people didn't want to pay. That's how it felt.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I didn't quite know how to find my way in this industry. It was very new, and I had a couple of cake maker friends. And initially, I just kind of copied what they were doing in terms of, pricing and how they would design their cakes. So I thought, well, that's the way to be successful. I mean, they're doing quite well. And then after a while, I just realized I wasn't finding that satisfaction that I wanted.
Mhm.
I look at some people, not so far from here, and look at their cake and just think, oh my God, this is a dream. This is what I actually want for myself. I
Yes.
didn't know how to get there. Then I just thought, you know what? I know my work is very feminine, it's very floral. This is the kind of work I like. And I thought, I'm going to start investing and thinking about how I can improve my skills. How can I start to learn the flower making? So I'm going to Google and to YouTube, practice flowers, and do lots of things like that. Just try to, and I also found just by practicing, not only was I learning so many things, I was picking up lots of skills, but it was
Mm.
also helping me, as you said, to find that voice that I was looking for. And the more flowers I made, the more I was like, this is where I really want to be. I think I really love working with flowers. So that was one of
Mhm.
the things. And then just having clients saying to me, look, we've seen this cake design. Could you do anything similar? And I'm like, wow, that's really creative. I'd love to do something similar, but not the same. Let's
Yes.
change it up, do this and that. It was just an amazing feeling. And I even now I wake up every morning and I'm just like, you know what? I just feel so lucky to be able to just make cakes and just kind of, just be creative.
When did you find that confidence to say, let me change it up?
That's a good question. It wasn't at the very beginning because the very beginning was about survival. It was about entering into the
Yeah.
industry and actually being noticed. So
Mm-hmm.
initially, it was just about getting the name out as people knew that I was making cakes. I would say the confidence came after I did the very first wedding cake for my friend. I remember just saying to her, "Look, I'm not going to charge you anything. I just want to do it for free, and I just want to have a chance to do a wedding cake." And she was like, "Okay." I said, "But I need to pay my expenses though, because it will cost me a lot." So she paid some of the expenses, and I went to the wedding. I attended it, set the whole cake up. It was a massive 5-tier, and that was my very first wedding cake. And I remember sitting at the wedding and looking over and thinking, wow, that 5-tier has stood up and it's still standing after all these hours. That must mean that you must know a thing or two about doweling and how to stack a cake and all of that. So it just that's when it struck me. I thought, do you know what? If I've got the basics right, hopefully in terms of structure, I've got the basics right in terms of flavor, what's
Mm-hmm.
stopping me from pushing myself to really target this niche market that I want to? And I
Yeah.
felt that it was the right time, and also there was a gap in the industry to do that. So when I
Mm-hmm.
started with creative cakes and these sorts of things, I felt that I started to get noticed, and people contact me and say, "Look, we love your work." And the funny thing is, initially when I used to make cakes, people would always send me pictures of other people's cakes, and I'd be fine with that. I'd be okay, and I would, quite happily say, "Well, let's change it up here or there," and they'd be okay with that. But it kind of got to the point over the years where people would then start sending me pictures of my own cakes and saying, "This is the cake that we love." And I'm like, wow, I've now become, that kind of inspiration for them, which is
Yeah.
amazing. And
Mm-hmm.
I still say to my clients, even now, look, even I love that cake, but I wouldn't repeat it. I want to change the design. I want to do something completely different. And they're really nice about it. They're lovely. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think at some point it just kind of clicked. And yeah.
Share with our listeners, there's some newbies on here, who are new bakers.
Mm.
And we have talk about survival, from moving from surviving to now becoming the reference for cakes.
Right. Interesting journey, actually, I have to say.
Yeah.
Because I think, you know what? People always say this, and I think it sounds very cliched, so I don't want it to sound like that, but I really do mean this. I think you have to really develop the confidence in yourself and your skills before your clients will develop that confidence in you. I had a student here just a few days ago. If she watches this, she'll know who I'm talking about. But she was saying to me, how on earth did you start doing wedding cakes? And I want to do so many designs and I just don't know how to do them. And I said, well, when I first started doing them, I would do lots of display cakes, like made from styrofoam. But I wouldn't go onto my social media and tell people they were styrofoam cakes. I would pretend they were real cakes because I wanted them to know a client's actually ordered it. But
Yeah.
before you get to that point, you have to be confident enough to know that if a client orders a cake that looks just like that, that you can actually recreate it. We don't be creating in some kind of false sense of reality that in a display cake it's perfect, but in real it's not.
Mhm.
So when I said that to her, she said, "Oh, that's great. I'm going to go back and I'm going to go and practice." And I said, "Yeah, just make sure you do that. Any designs that you really want to do, you want to push your creative skills, try them out on display cakes and really make mistakes, learn from that, share it with your followers, and this is what they will be inspired by." So I think over the years, it's just a case of when I started to become more confident in myself, and I had people coming to me and saying, it's really funny because when I first started, I wanted as many orders as possible. I think
Yeah.
everyone does, right? But then obviously it changes after a while. And
Yeah.
it got to the point where people would actually say to me, thank you for your time, but we just feel as if the price is a bit too high, it's a bit out of our budget." And I'd say, "Oh, okay." And I'd always think to myself, I don't mind being known as the expensive cake maker. That's okay because they love my work. The thing is, I'm just out of their budget. It's not that I'm expensive, they just can't afford me. And when I started changing my mentality, I thought, do you know what? I don't mind being told that, I'm too pricey or they can't afford me. It actually felt like an honor to be told that, as opposed to, "Oh, can you price match so and so?" It's like, no, it's not really the kind of work that I do. So it took a while for me to get the message out there. And I think from my work
Yes.
and from the kind of orders I would get, people began to realize slowly that if we wanted like an inexpensive or cheap cake or, kind of supermarket style cake, she probably
Mhm.
isn't the right person to go to.
Yeah. As I'm seeing your cakes behind you, right?
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about your cake style and your target
Mhm.
audience. I think both things speak to each other, to be honest.
Yeah.
When I look at your cake, I knew who your target is. How
Mhm.
would you describe your own personal cake style?
So I would say it's I love taller tiers. I love them to be elegant, refined, artistically creative, um, and just something which is quite memorable, I would say. So and
Mhm.
it's quite a fine line between classic and do something so out there and artistic that people might be a bit alienated by. So I would love to push the boundaries even more.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it's a bit scary sometimes. So it is something that I would love to do more of. But I need to find the right clients for that. So but at the moment I'm very happy just making very floral kind of inspired cakes, just really
Mhm.
classic, beautiful, elegant cakes. That's really my style.
Yeah. So how do you think this style of yours does inform your target audience then, right? And how important it is to actually speak to this target for you?
For me, the actual style that I do actually represents me in a lot of ways. So when I'm speaking to my audience, I want them to know this is the style of work that I would create.
Yeah.
They can come to me with the styles if they want to, if that's what they like. But I would always send them ideas of what I think is important and what I think would look nice as well, because I want that cake to look as elegant and as memorable on their special day as they want to. And I
Yeah.
know about styles and trends. So when someone comes to me with a cake that I just really don't like the look of, I'm very happy just to be honest and say, look, this really isn't my style. I wouldn't do that. And as soon as I start sending them pictures or ideas, suddenly they're like, oh, wow, we love that actually. It's
Yeah.
great. So what
Yeah.
you find with a lot of people is, especially if they're not in the cake industry, they haven't seen those amazing designs and stuff that we probably have seen, and we're probably very
Mhm.
inspired by ourselves. So obviously it's our kind of duty to kind of inform them and educate people as well, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of style, I really do feel like the more people see my work, the more they understand and can see what my style is. I don't feel like I need to go and kind of explain it to people. They literally just come and have a look at my gallery and they're like, they know exactly what kind of work I do. And
Yes.
it's just amazing that people can, they can see that work and they love it so much and they contact you. I just think this whole industry for me has been a real confidence booster. It's been amazing. And I love working with my clients.
How important is it for you to teach and educate?
That's actually a really good question because when I first came into the industry, um, one thing I struggled with a bit was I didn't want to work with buttercream at all, as in that buttercream on the outside of cakes, right? So I feel as if I was one of the first people who introduced ganache in this area, right? Now ganache was something, especially to my client base, um, people were not familiar with. It was something completely new. And I remember when I first mentioned it, people were like, "Oh, what's that?" And
Mm-hmm.
I encouraged them. And there's almost this kind of feeling of, well, we're used to this. And I was like, I understand what you're used to, but this is the way I make my cakes. And it tastes delicious, don't worry. But it's just this it's just so stable. There are so many things that can go wrong with buttercream. And we're lucky in this country, we have, cold weather and warm weather's fine. But for me,
Mm-hmm.
even all day, it's just too risky. I don't want to spend that much time on a piece of artwork that can suddenly they drive right down the road or they get to the venue and we don't have air conditioning everywhere. It's just so risky.
Yeah.
So I was kind of very set in my ways about what I wanted to provide. And I remember it was the button at first. People didn't want to know. They were like, "No, but can't you just do buttercream?" And I was like, "No, this is the way I
Mm-hmm.
do it." And it took me a while to be very firm and say, "This is actually what I'm going to be providing." And if you'd like to order, that's fine. If not, then you're very welcome to look elsewhere. That's fine. People got the message eventually, and now I've noticed everyone is doing ganache in the local area. So whether
Yeah.
they admit it or not, they have learned a few tricks, I think, along the way.
Yeah.
Um, and I think obviously we all inspire each other in many different ways.
In many
So it's
different
a great
ways.
journey to be on. Yeah. And you learn as you go along, everyone learns. It's
Yeah.
all a massive learning curve.
Yep. And you can't not learn, right? If you're an artist and you're in a space and you're seeing all of this new knowledge on the forefront, you're going to adapt and you are going to I would say be inspired by,
Yes.
these great bakers out there. So I lead a foundation. I probably talked to you at the top of the conversation. It's called Cake Therapy. It's the Cake Therapy Foundation for Girls. And it specifically speaks to marginalized girls, the therapeutic aspect of baking.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned, that baking like literally changed my life. And in conversations such as this, I see where, baking has been this kind of instrument to a lot of cake artists. They speak, they share similar sentiments about baking. How has baking impacted your life, Halima?
I think it's had a massive impact on my life. I'll tell you one thing about baking is that not only is it therapeutic and it's amazing to kind of get lost in that world and you can put all your worries and concerns aside because you're just focused on that one thing. The other thing it taught me more than anything was it just gave me so much confidence because when I would create something from scratch, I had a vision in my head, I would draw a sketch, and to actually bring that to life and then to see a client's
Hmm.
reaction based on that, that was amazing. That I had the ability to actually do that. And the more I did it, the more amazing reactions I got, the more I thought, do you know what? This is something which is really good for me because it makes me feel really good about myself. And to physically
Yeah.
see a client's reaction, it's a really special moment that we share. So I say for me, it's been therapeutic. It's been, I think, on so many different levels, it's really changed my perspective about life, about the way people are, the way things are. I mean, the fact that cake can bring so much joy to people because it brings people together when it comes to many celebrations and weddings.
Hmm.
Um, that cake represents so much to a lot of people, but I think in the same way when we make it as well, it represents our soul and heart and soul in so many different ways. And we try so hard to make it perfect. So um, I would definitely say whether it's baking, whether it's anything else, definitely find something that makes you happy and
Yeah.
just spend time on that. I think that's really important. Mental health is a massive issue nowadays with a lot of people. So I think if you can find something that you really enjoy, I think, definitely that's a good thing to do.
Yeah. Do you still enjoy it after almost 10 years of baking?
Absolutely. I have
Yeah.
always said if there ever comes a moment where I stop enjoying this business, I will
Yeah.
just leave because there's no point in doing something in life. Life is too short. My kids are growing up now, they're now teenagers, and I feel like I don't want to spend a moment doing something that I'm not happy with or I'm not enjoying. Um, I feel like when I first started, I took on too many orders. At that point, I wasn't enjoying it. It was more a case of I need to get known. I want everyone to know that I'm what I'm doing. It was more about, like you said, survival. It's
Yeah.
now got to the point where, thankfully, I think I'm very lucky. I just created a website. It's up and running now. Obviously, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and word of mouth. It's amazing how I don't make that many cakes at the moment, but word of mouth is get around. I do receive a lot of inquiries without really doing much. So it just goes to
Yeah.
show that when you put the hard work and effort in, it does come back.
Hmm.
It takes a while sometimes, and it might not work according to your rota, according to when you think people should start inquiring. But just put the work and effort in, people will
Yeah.
start inquiring, and it's an amazing feeling when that happens.
Absolutely. And look at you now, right? Look at you now. Let's talk about entrepreneurship because be, cake therapy wants to teach girls, marginalized girls, how to bake, right? We
Mhm.
want them to use it as a tool to respond to their own traumas, but we also want them to be able to use it as a vacation where they can monetize. So let's talk
Mhm.
about entrepreneurship. This is, like I mentioned, this is like one of the main focuses of cake therapy. You established your cake business in 2014. This is the span of time, a great mark of success. I see you as a successful business owner.
Mhm.
How has your entrepreneurship journey been? And speak to the
Mhm.
struggles from the beginning to
Yeah.
now.
Okay. So starting off with absolutely no financial kind of like, uh, kind of money to actually start with. I had no money. I was like, right, how am I going to make this? I didn't want to ask my husband for some money. I was like, no, I want to do it by myself, because I'm Miss Independent and I want to prove to him that I could do it. So I remember doing a cake for a friend and just charging absolutely nothing for it. And just feeling afterwards, I spent so many hours working on that cake. Why didn't I charge enough? I just didn't understand it. But I knew I just wanted to get out there. I wanted to get my name out there. And, the feedback was great. It was fantastic. I think over the years, what I've learned when it comes to just being an entrepreneur and just being kind of you've got to be quite goal focused. So when it comes to the first year, second year, think about where you want to be, but be realistic as well. I mean, I can't be top of my game after year one or year two. I can't start
Hmm.
teaching after doing this for a couple of months. Okay, you've got to learn the skills and make mistakes. Now, talking about making mistakes, I have honestly, I've spoken about this in a previous podcast as well, but I feel when I made mistakes, I learned the most from those mistakes. And it really changed me as a baker for the better. At the
Hmm.
time, it can be soul destroying if you get negative feedback or you get people saying to me, well, the design doesn't quite match what we were discussing, or whatever the feedback might be. And everyone out there gets negative feedback, whether they admit to it or not. And we know this as
Yes.
bakers because you can never appeal to 100% of the market, right? So when I go out there, that the whole of the people and the whole of the market in Nottingham, they are not my customers, right? They're not going to be the
Yeah.
kind of people who like my work. Some will like my work, some won't. Some will like the taste of it, some won't. Some will simply not be happy with the prices. And some people will just say, well, I think so and so's cakes are better. Fine. I'm not trying to compete for everyone out there. I just want just a few people to understand what I'm doing, to like what I'm doing, and place an order. And I'm happy with that, right?
Hmm.
So in the past, whenever I received negative feedback, whether it comes to the taste of a cake or the way a cake looks, or I've never had any structural issues, but those sorts of things, I found that initially they're very difficult to hear because it feels very personal. Like we
Hmm.
talked about before, you put your heart and soul into this industry, and every cake is like a new project. And we do try very hard, but we do sometimes make mistakes. And I think the most important thing about when someone gives you feedback is to actually stand back, take a day or two if you need to, but sit back and actually think to yourself, is there any justification in what they're saying? Were they right or were they wrong? Some
Yeah.
people will simply complain for the sake of complaining because they are used to it or they want money back or whatever the reasons why it might be. So the customer's not always right in this instance. And obviously you should have a system in place. If they have a certain issue, they should come and bring back the cake or whatever the situation might be. You should have some steps to be able to follow so you can establish whether what they're saying is right or wrong. But there have been times when people have said to me certain things about my sponges and cakes, and I thought, are they right? Actually, I think what they might be saying, there might be some validity to that. Is it just me or? And then actually, really made me think about how I do my work and the
Hmm.
process involved, and if I could change it to make it any better. So
Hmm.
sometimes you might lose a client in the process. Sometimes you might actually keep that client. It just depends. But
Yeah.
don't take it personally. Try your best to just understand that not every client will be 100% happy with you all the time. If they have any issues or they have any problems, try and see if you can resolve it. But if you get a gut feeling from the time a client places an order and it's a negative feeling and you feel the client's not right for you, I would urge every person out there to just go with your gut feeling and just say, look, I'm sorry. I don't think this is going to work out. I think we should perhaps you should look for someone else. And I've done
Yeah.
that before. I have no qualms
Mhm.
about doing it because I think it's important. I'll tell you the story actually. I don't know if the client will see this or not. Probably not. But I had a client who came to me once for a wedding cake, and she messaged me before and said, "Look, we love the style of your cakes and the designs and everything. and we would love to have a wedding cake from you. I said, okay, fine. So I arranged for a consultation. Before she came, she said to me, you know, sometimes we have cakes that we've seen at venues, and sometimes they're slanting or they're not perfectly straight, or they don't look quite as refined as they do, you know, in people's studios or whatever. And we don't want that. So it kind of set me back a bit. I thought, okay, that's a bit strange. And then said to me, and would you kind of negotiate the price? And I went, no, I'm sorry, I don't negotiate prices. Right. This is when I was coming out of the phase of understanding that I now need to establish a niche and just learn to say no to people if it doesn't feel right and just go with the gut. I wasn't quite
Yeah.
So she came up for a consultation, her and her sister, and we sat and had a good old chat, and she tasted the cake, so I was very happy. But as she left, she again mentioned to me about the price. And I said to her, look, we have spoken before, and you know, I don't negotiate prices. And she was just insistent, and it just left me feeling, do you know what? I don't think I like this client. I don't think we're going to get along, because I think she will always look for a reason. She's already mentioned some cakes are not perfect enough for her. So after she left, I sat down, had a really good long think about this. I spoke to my husband. I said, you know, this client doesn't seem right for me. And he just said, she doesn't feel right. You have to send her a message and just say to her, look, I don't think this is going to work. You know, maybe you should look elsewhere. And I found that really difficult to do. But I thought, do you know what? I think I'm going to have to do it. And I did.
Yeah.
I sent a message. I said, look, it was lovely to meet you and your sister. You know, it was really nice to have you over. But I don't think our relationship, I didn't say relationship, I don't think this will be the right kind of union in terms of, you know, the cakes. I don't think I'm the best cake maker for you. And, you know, in your search and looking for a cake maker. And I think, you know, I left it at that. And I remember she replied, she was very cross, and she said, I'm just looking for a wedding cake. I don't want to marry you or anything. I don't want to get into a relationship. I just want a wedding cake. And then she just blocked me. And I remember feeling like, oh, that's not how we wanted to go. She didn't understand my message. And it makes me laugh now, because I think, you know, it was fantastic. It was good riddance from my point of view. It was fantastic that she got the message. She blocked me. If she hadn't blocked me, who knows? I might have, you know, kind of had a weak moment. Oh, I'll just do it for her. So
Yeah, let me just make her a cake, right?
Exactly. Every new baker out there, an existing baker, an experience, whatever. If you get the gut,
Yeah.
just go ahead with it, because your gut is never wrong. And I've learned that.
Yeah, definitely follow your gut. So I've been following you for a long time. You know, I keep telling our listeners that I've been following you for a long time, because I have been following you for a long time. Yeah. And you've gone through a rebranding.
Yes.
Of, you know, I was gonna, you know, since I've been following you. Tell me a little bit about that. Why you rebranded, and share with our listeners the importance of rebranding once you see that you need to.
That's an interesting question. So when I first started, honestly, I didn't take this cake business very seriously. My husband sat down with me, and we were discussing cake pages, cake names, how should I start? And he literally just came up with a name, a random name. It was Cake Delicious Pops. I don't even know how he came up with it. And honestly, I was that uninterested in this whole concept. I just thought, oh, it's not really going to work. I didn't have much confidence in myself.
Yeah.
So he just created the name. I just thought, oh, okay, I'll just go along with it. So it was fine. It was kind of fun, playful, fine. But over the years, what happened was I would always get people saying to me, do you do cake pops? Because obviously it had cake with just pops at the end of it. And it got to the point where I'd been asked that all the time, and I got really frustrated, because I was like, cake pop for me personally, and because I imagine them quite simple, quite straightforward. But there's not a lot of financial kind of profit in that. And for me, I don't want to be doing cake pops. I certainly don't want to specialize in cake pops. And I certainly don't want people contacting me thinking that's all I do. That's completely
Yeah.
But it took me a while to realize, oh my gosh, you know, my name is actually hindering me. And I've got a couple of very good friends in the cake industry, and they did say to me, you know, your name sometimes might imply that you just do cake pops. And I knew at the back of my head for a very long time I'd want to rebrand. And honestly, I couldn't find the right name. I think there was a lack of confidence as well. I just felt that if I did change my name, would people know who I am? Would they recognize me and my, you know, my work? It was just a very scary time, and I wasn't sure if I should do it or not. But
Yeah.
I finally took the plunge. I think it wasn't my husband this time. I don't think I asked him. I thought he's not the right person to consult with. I was just discussing, I think, thinking about cake names. Spoke to a friend of mine who also makes cakes, and we kind of brainstormed a few names. And as soon as a name came through, I was like, this is so me. When I think about Halima's cake artistry, I'm like, I see my work as a form of art.
Mm-hmm.
The floral work I do, I spend a lot of time and effort on that. The intricate design work, the piping. I mean, there is a lot of a lot of hours that go into that. So it is a form of artistry for me. A friend of mine said to me, "You've got to put your name in there because people know you by your name, even if they don't know, Cake Just Pops is your name, but your name is so important."
Yeah.
And culturally, actually, it's very interesting because I don't see many Asian people with their name in the actual title of their business. They don't actually have it. And growing up in Nottingham, I think with the past 20 years, I have experienced some racism. And I always had this thing about, is the name going to put people off? Are they going to think, well, this is a strange name? I mean, does that still happen? Does it still exist? But the thoughts were going through my mind, do I want to put my name there or not? Because of the background I've come from
Mm-hmm.
and with some of the experiences I've had, it did worry me a bit. But as soon as I started rebranding, I requested for a logo, got the website done, suddenly everything just came into place. And I was like,
Yeah.
this is so me. It got to the point where people say to me, what is your business name? And I didn't want to tell them it's Cake Just Pops because I was like, just look me up. I'll send you a link. I didn't actually want to give them my business name because I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
Now when people say to me, I'm there ready with my business card, I've got Halima's Cake Artistry, just Google me. I have that sense of pride that I didn't really quite have before. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the sign to me that it was time to change. I knew my work was changing. It was far more elegant and refined compared to how it used to be. And I felt my name just did not reflect the style of work that I was doing. So there had
Mm.
to be a change at some point, and I had to be brave enough just to go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
And thankfully I did, and it was the best thing ever.
That's good. Did you think that that's the moment of finding Halima's voice in her business as well? Would you say that?
Um, I think I've always had a voice. I think I've been confident enough to know that, I am good at what I do. I didn't have any
Mhm.
doubt about that. But the fear was, will people know once I've changed, will they recognize the fact that this is still me? Will they think
Yeah.
my style has changed? And also, will they still know that it's still me without knowing who like, for example, you said to me, when you see my work, you instantly know it's me. The concern
Mhm.
was if they see my work and then suddenly it's like, oh, it's a different name. Is this so and so? It was that worries, that concern. But honestly, I had
Yeah.
nothing to worry about. I kind of gave a few warnings initially. Everyone knew it was happening. And when I changed, it was so smooth. Thank
Yeah.
goodness. I had any issues
Seamless.
whatsoever. It was, yeah. So it was the
Mhm.
right thing to do, and I'm so, so happy with my new name.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wouldn't change it for anything.
Yep. You're happy not with your new name, but with
Yeah,
your name, with using your name at this point, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So, before we wrap up, I want to, you mentioned your husband and your children. You have this successful business. How are you doing it?
Um, I just find that I have found what works for me best. So, like I mentioned to you, I don't do a lot of cakes because I like to do one or two a week. That is honestly more than enough for me. Some of them are very
Mhm.
detailed, so one a week is actually quite a lot for me, but I'm happy with that. I was lucky enough to have my own studio built just last year. I've had that for a few months. That's where I'm in at the moment. And that completely changed everything for me because then I had my own private space, and I felt like before I used to do everything in the house. So when the kids were around, as they were growing up, especially, it became very exhausting looking after them, the
Mhm.
husband. Everyone chipped and did their bit, but it just always felt like I was always the one who was worse for wear. Everyone else is okay and coping, but I was really struggling all the time. So it got to a point where I had to kind of review what is going to be best for me. First of all, giving up the job, that was the best thing I did. And then when I started cakes, it was a case of, right, how much can I actually manage? Because I've got a family life here. Recently, I've really got into health and fitness. I go to the gym quite regularly, for example, and I meet up with friends. There are things that I was missing out on in life. I'm
Yeah.
thinking, I don't want to look back and think my whole life I worked and okay, I had a creative, leash, and that I kind of use that as well. And that's fantastic. But I want to be able to live my life. I want to be able to go for a
Mhm.
coffee, go for cake with a friend, and not have to worry about rushing home. So it was about sitting back and realizing what works best for me. I worked it
Mhm.
all out, and I was like, I want to just do less cakes, focus more on being creative. I'm now teaching as well, which I've been asked for many, many years to do, and finally I'm doing it. And
Yes.
I can actually say I feel really happy, I feel content, and this is exactly where I want to be.
Good. So
Yeah.
before you go, share with our listeners, I would say newbies or people who've been in this field, 2 of your most important baking tips.
Okay. Baking tips. Right. Okay. I would say when it comes to your sponge, for example, try out different recipes. But if you like something and you think it's right for you, try and tweak that recipe as opposed to trying out lots of different recipes. That's probably a much better way to move forward. You can try lots of different recipes and get lots of different feedback, but have one sponge, stick to it. That is really the foundation for anything that you do, any cake that you make. It will always be the same about the sponge, obviously, about tasting it. You can tweak it in so many different ways. You can Google tips, you can look at ideas. So do that, for example. Second baking tip, I would say, don't be afraid to experiment when it comes to designs, flavors, samples, whatever. Do what works for you. You don't have to follow everyone else because they're doing it in a certain way. If you've got a particular style or you want to be creative in a certain way, don't be afraid to show that. If you have the confidence to show it, eventually your clients will start believing in you as well.
Yeah. Those are good tips, guys. Don't be afraid to try new things and improve on recipes. What's on the horizon for you? I know you're teaching, but what else is there?
Um, I don't know, to be honest. I don't really set myself long-term goals in terms of the baking industry. Honestly, if I'm being very frank with you, I feel as if I've been in this industry for 10 years and I feel like I've achieved a lot. I feel very happy with what I've done. I had my Cake Masters feature just last year. I've taught in Paris, which was the most amazing experience of my life. I've started teaching here from my studio. I feel like I've actually got to the point where I've wanted to be for a long time, and that makes me very, very happy. I would
Yeah.
love to do really huge, grand wedding cakes, like like a massive 10 tier, 12 tiers. That's something that I would love to get into. I don't know if the idea of it is actually much more exciting than it actually is in practice, because I know that would be a lot of work. So I'd have to think
Mhm.
about how I want to, if I want to do that as well. I have been invited to do international wedding cakes before. At the time, I didn't have the confidence to do them, but I think if an offer would come now, I would love to take that on and just kind of see where that would lead me. So I feel the future's bright. There's so much to look forward to. You never know
Yeah.
what's around the corner. Always be open-minded, and just be confident and happy in what you're doing. I think if you do that, people do see that as well. And that's the best piece of advice I can give anyone.
Good. So we leave it there. Be happy and confident in what you're doing. Halima, I've enjoyed our conversation. I've waited a long time to talk to you. I've waited a long time to meet
Thank
you in
you.
person. And I
Mhm.
know that our listeners have learned a lot from our conversation today. I want to personally say this to you, that your work speaks to me, and for some reason I knew you before I met you. And because
Mhm.
I saw your work and I see how responsive you are to up and coming artists, because sometimes in this industry it becomes a little intimidating, and
Yeah.
you do not shy away from responding, and treating people as equal. And I love that about you. And I want to say thank you again for coming. um I've enjoyed the conversation, and I want to say thank you to our listeners. I hope that you've had your slice of joy and healing with the Cake Therapy podcast. Please go and check out our website. It's www.cake-therapy.org. It's cake-therapy.org for Cake Therapy Foundation. And you can also buy us a coffee. All the donations that come from buying us a coffee goes towards, helping marginalized girls in our community. So thank you all for listening. Halima, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure, Altricia.
Thank you for tuning in to the Cake Therapy Podcast. Your support means the world to us. Let us know what you thought about today's episode in the comment section. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And if you found the conversation helpful, please share it with a friend. Also, follow Sugar Spoon Desserts on all social media platforms. We invite you to support Cake Therapy and the work we do with our foundation by clicking on the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description or by visiting the Cake Therapy website and making a donation. All your support will go towards the Cake Therapy Foundation and the work we are doing to help women and girls. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode.